Even when they're ultimately benign, you can't have a story about a magical family looking after a village of people walled in by impassable mountains without a few problems coming up. Disney has taken a break from churning out Star Wars and Marvel content like it's running out of time. Get it? Because Lin-Manuel Miranda and that Hamilton song? You get it. Churned out what made the House of Mouse what it is. A heartfelt, animated, sure-to-be classic with songs your theater friends will be singing at every party for the next few years. You're welcome. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep doing that. But just because I'm not crying you are, that doesn't mean that there aren't some questions. We're gonna have to talk about more than just Bruno. Most of the drama in Encanto revolves around the second youngest member of the family Madrigal and her special lack of specialness, Mirabel. She gets to live with gifted siblings and well-meaning parents trying to insist that you have gifts too. Thanks, Mom, but my sister literally just juggled a church. Not being constantly depressed about that doesn't feel like a superpower. Now, the powers of the family Madrigal are granted to each members in a ceremony where they're given a door and a special TARDIS-style room that's bigger on the inside and fitting in with their special gift. All, except Mirabel, whose door just dissolved in front of everyone. Now, with no superpower, it kind of makes sense that she doesn't get her own superpower room, but Casita could have at least hooked her up with her own digs instead of leaving her in the nursery, sharing a room with each new edition of the family Madrigal until they go off and get their own magical rooms. Now, that kind of thing tracks with the way that Abuela treats Mirabel, but Casita seems to at least be fond enough of her that it could have at least given her a space of her own. Though, Abuela does seem to have Casita on a tight leash at times. And, given what she believed Mirabel was going to do, maybe she thought it best that someone have an eye on her at all times. Everyone's magic room is an elaborate expression of their particular gift. Antonio gets a jungle playland, Isabella gets a flower-filled room that would send a bumblebee into a food coma. There were a few concept drawings for Luisa, ranging from a boulder-based weight gym or a primitive CrossFit setup to a whole carnival that she could escape to, but presumably wasn't. Bruno, however, gets a room right out of an Indiana Jones movie. His room and prognosticating location was at the top of a huge set of stairs and then separated by a chasm. Bruno probably had that cubbyhole room long before being exiled, just so he didn't have to climb 50 stories of stairs just to go to bed. But there is an issue beyond the Encanto being kinda mean to Bruno. How did Mirabel get out once she got in? If there was a wooden bridge over the chasm, it was gone by the time that Mirabel got there, and she had to use the rope rail to create a rope swing to clear the chasm. That swing was secured by having a post wedged between rocks on the room side, which also had its cliff crumble after Mirabel Tarzaned herself over. When the room, aggressively suggests she leave by collapsing, there's a scene missing between when she breaks through the door and returns to her fam. How did she clear that chasm from this side of it? There wasn't anything to hook the rope on the same way she swung over, and with the crumbling cliff, the gap was even larger. Cause and effect are always a little slippery when it comes to both magic and prognostication. Now, while we'll leave the issue of free will if the future is written to that guy with a guitar in your college dorm common room, there is a bit of an issue of who caused what to happen. The message overall seems to be that Abuela's crushing expectations and controlling nature was stifling the family and therefore reducing the family's access to the Encanto and eventually destroying the house. Now, while that pressure is there without a powerless Mirabel, as she eventually gets her sisters to reveal through song how the pressure of expectations with her powers is slowly eating away at them, Mirabel's lack of power brings out the worst in Abuela. Part of that is down to her asking Bruno to look into the future and see what would happen. Bruno sees an unsure future where Mirabel either destroys or saves the house, and by extension the magic. Turns out, it was both. But realizing that this expectation will result in even more pressure on his niece, Bruno smashes the prophecy and goes into hiding. Though Bruno's departure to protect his niece does set into motion Abuela's increasing concern and tightens her grip on the family even more, going so far as to forbid talking about Bruno, which accelerates the decline of the magic until Mirabel can get her family to come to terms with the crushing weight of expectations. While most of the time Bruno was blamed for the predictions he makes, the one he tried to hide turned out to be the one that was set in motion. So the movie begins on the day that Mirabel's cousin Antonio gets his power, which turns out to be the ability to talk to animals. Now, this raises a few issues, like Antonio's probably going to get an earful about how the donkeys feel after being tossed around by his other cousin. If you can have a conversation with your food before it becomes food, that might make it a little harder to eat it as food. Chances are Antonio went vegetarian pretty quickly. Now, that's something that an omnivore can do, but it's not a switch that'll be as easy for his new bestie, the jaguar. The jaguar is a predator whose metabolism requires the meat of the things that it kills. So, what's the jaguar eating? Is it just that occasionally the jaguar goes off and does its own thing, so to speak, and then Antonio and the jaguar never talk about it? Or is that jaguar really hungry by the end of the movie and going to have a difficult conversation with Antonio? Now, part of what takes Mirabel's situation from bad to worse is when her dad discovers the prophecy she recovered from Bruno's room and has a discussion about it within range of Dolores, who can hear everything and is terrible at keeping secrets. It seems like the inability to have a private conversation or keep things secret would engender a Bruno level of distrust, but that's only one problem. Thanks to Dolores' super hearing, she's been aware of Bruno living in the crawl space the entire time. Somehow, she has managed to keep this massive, family-shattering secret all to herself. She gets close to trying to tell everyone when they're singing about Bruno, saying, "I can hear him now," but everyone takes that as a metaphor. Now, maybe it's the heft of that secret that makes it harder to keep any other secret. While we're here, how did Luisa hear the adults talk about the fading magic, and Dolores only heard her twitching eye? Antonio's first wildlife friend comes in the form of a toucan that checks to see if Antonio can understand him. Finally, he's been trying to get people to follow his nose for so long. That secret stash of Fruit Loops has just been sitting there. The toucan shows up again when Mirabel decides to go into Bruno's room and discover the secret to saving the magic. Pretty much immediately, the toucan flies to the top to wait her out, and as soon as things get spooky, it can't fly out fast enough. But, why was he there? He doesn't seem to run to get help like the thrush telling Bard where to hit Smaug, he just goes. Antonio learns the whole Bruno adventure from Bruno's rats. Now, those guys probably have a pretty crazy story to tell. The family madrigal's magical powers seem to operate for the most part like superpowers. Luisa can lift at will as long as the power tap is on. Isabella creates flowers with a thought. Peppa can't seem to shut her powers down. Antonio immediately understands Pico the toucan. Bruno's power, on the other hand, appears to have a raft of conditions attached to it. He needs a large space to do it in, but he also has to arrange materials and perform a kind of ritual more like casting a spell than using a superpower. Is that something he came up with to control the visions? If not, how did he learn he needed to do all that? Now, Bruno may have found some more accessible digs when he went into hiding to prevent anyone from seeing his predictions, but that doesn't mean that he gave up that Indiana Jones aesthetic. His hidden digs came complete with a secret door and a series of obstacles that made it difficult to follow him, especially given his familiarity with the path. But there is a question of exactly how well he knew that pathway he's been living in for a decade. There's an open pit that has to be crossed by bouncing back and forth between floorboard remnants to avoid falling into its misty depth. When Mirabel fails, she cries out for Casita to help her, but it's Bruno that returns to attempt to save her niece a second time, but the tables turn when he falls as well. Only to find out the bottomless pit isn't really all that deep to begin with. In 10 years, he never noticed that? Now, Abuela is a fairly complex character, a wide step from the evil for evil's sake Cruellas and Maleficents of Disney's past. Forced to flee her home, she lost her husband when he sacrificed himself to save the refugees, only to be gifted a magical power that would give her subsequent generations magical powers. Now, her control over the building power of the candle as the family matriarch meant that she also adopted the responsibility for the safety and well-being of the entire township that were part of the enchantment. Wielding a power she didn't necessarily understand with the pressures she was under, she developed some unhealthy relationships with her family, and the pressure of her expectations literally squeezed the magic out of the family. Given her previous loss and her fear of losing the one thing that holds the township together that she doesn't fully understand, one could see how her attitude would be intractable. But they did such a good job of establishing why she would have this point of view, it becomes hard to understand how being yelled at by the one person you were sure was going to bring the house down would change her mind. perhaps the prospect of losing the magic and another grandchild finally pushed her back from the ledge. Now this mistake happened off-screen, but is a big one for a company normally on point on what to monetize and how. Ask any screenwriter, and they'll tell you that the line that they think will be the quotable one will never be, and bands are often not able to predict what song on the album will be a hit. So, when it came time for Disney to submit songs from their musical for Oscar consideration, they chose not We Don't Talk About Bruno. The song has outstripped Frozen's Let It Go for most successful Disney song. Also not submitted, my personal favorite, Surface Pressure, which hit number 5. Instead, Dos Oruguitas was submitted. Honestly, Casita is the best power of the whole lot. The rest of the powers carry with them expectations and hassles, but a house that will adjust itself and make a slide out of stairs when you need it? Sign me up!
Well, the only thing more fun about the movie was the video about the movie. What were some of your favorite moments from Encanto? Did you notice any mistakes that we didn't? If so, let us know in the comments below. And as always, everybody, thanks for watching.